Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. You're looking at yourselves in this camera, and the reason is because when we get linked up to Tanzania, Tanzania, um, they're going to be seeing you in that picture. So as Joe said during the worship service, we always start with Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Amen. Praise the Lord. About 20 years ago, when Joe and I joined Holy Trinity, I don't think I could have pointed out Tanzania on a world map. Now we know a lot about it, but what Joe prepared for a handout is 3 pages. Maybe you can tell folks what's there.
Someone has superimposed on here the United States, China, Mexico, India, and a whole bunch of other countries. All of those fit into Africa. So it just gives a little context for how big the place actually is. And the third page has Tanzania superimposed over New England. As you can see, it's bigger than all of New England and into Canada and so on. So just for your reference about where this place is that we're talking about.
Thank you. So just brief history, bringing us here today. About 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, Kurt and Dot could tell us, a partnership between Holy Trinity Lutheran Church and a rural village in southern Tanzania had just begun when we had joined the church. And if you look at the Tanzania map, Iringa, Tanzania, and Isimani, Tanzania are in the southern part of the country. One of our church members at the time, who recently passed away, Joe Lugala, grew up in that small village of Isimani, Tanzania, where his father was the pastor. And he was instrumental in connecting Holy Trinity Lutheran Church with the Lutheran Church there and forming a partnership between the two churches. That was in the early 2000s, I believe. We joined Holy Trinity in 2004. But it turned out that there were some Minnesotans who had been spending time in Iringa, in the Iringa Diocese, and working with the Diocese of Iringa for quite a few years before that, and had developed a partnership to oversee about 70 partnerships then existing between Lutheran churches in the St. Paul area synod and Lutheran churches in the Iringa Diocese in southern Tanzania. And that organization was named Bega Kwa Bega, which is Swahili for shoulder to shoulder. And shortly after our partnership with Isimani began, at some point before 2006, we, Holy Trinity, and our partner Isimani I think we asked and were invited to join the Bega Kwa Bega organization, even though we weren't within the St. Paul area synod. And we've been a part of that ever since. That partnership between the St. Paul area synod and the Diocese of Iringa and all of its member partnerships is built on 3 pillars: prayer, presence, and projects. As to prayer, we pray for each other every Sunday, as we did today in the prayers of the people. And at the worship service in Isimani that occurred 6 or 7 hours ago now, they prayed for us. Presence, that's presence ending in CE, not TS. Presence means being together, if at all possible. And groups from the U.S. travel to their partner villages often. And Projects is working on projects together, and you'll hear from other folks this morning about what some of those projects have been over the years. Each year we contribute $1,000 to the Isamani Parish. We've sponsored, by funding scholarships, many Isamani students to secondary school there over the years, and been involved with several projects together. There have been groups from Holy Trinity that have traveled to Iringa and Isamani on several occasions, the first in 2006. Pastor Optebeck accompanied that group. There was a group in 2009 that came over. Dot and I were actually there for a long time teaching when that group came over. A group in 2012 and a group in 2013. As those years went along, Joe and I have become involved with Bega Qua Bega as coordinators and now ambassadors to visit remote parishes that haven't had a visit from their partner for a number of years. And that's what we do, and we're over there for a couple of months every summer. So we're having this program to let people know what this is about. There's a lot of new people in this church in the last 10 years. And to see about re-energizing, renewing this relationship now that the pandemic is over. Both churches have now fairly new pastors, and hopefully looking forward to a group trip in 2025. So, those are my remarks. I did want to share one quick story that Lynn Optebeck, Pastor Optebeck, shared with me. He couldn't be here today. He's in Maine. But when he went, and maybe the others there in 2006 were Kurt and Dot and Ed, I think. In 2006? Margaretta was 2000. Yeah. Anyway, maybe you'll remember this. He's, they went out to worship at Isamani, and he gave the sermon. And he said for his children's sermon, he brought along 100 beanie babies that were donated by Holy Trinity members. And he said everything was going well, and about 40 to 50 kids came forward for the children's sermon, and that's when things started to not go so well. He doesn't remember what his story was about, but as he was handing out the beanie babies to the children that had come up for the sermon, children started coming from every direction, more than 100. And he said it was a near riot. Every kid reaching out, the older ones pushing aside the younger ones. I just tossed out the remaining beanie babies so as not to be crushed. It was memorable for me, but anyway, okay. So I'm going to turn it over to the Kasichs and let them share with you some of the history because they've been in from the beginning.
Let me backtrack a little bit. One day, this big black man came into the congregation and wanted to speak with Pastor Optebeck. And he said, I'm wondering if the church would be willing to put a new roof on the parsonage in my father's hometown, my hometown. And Lynn said, well, how much would it cost? And this man, Joe Lagala, said, about $500. And Lynn said, I think we can do that, and I think we can do more. He went to the council, and the council said, yes, we can do much more. And that's how we really got started in our dealings with Iringa. The other thing is that we really weren't with Bega Qua Bega at the very beginning. We were kind of on our own. And if it wasn't for Joe Lugala, who, by the way, bought this for me when we were in Africa one time, and it's very special, we wouldn't be involved with Bega Qua Bega.
So Joe did not buy this for me, but when that first time when we went to Iringa, the Iringa diocese had just started sewing schools for girls, and so Isamani was in the first stages of a sewing school for girls. The reason the sewing schools were being started was because a lot of the girls didn't get to go to high school. If a family had both girls and boys, and they only had money for some of them to go to high school, the boys went, and the girls didn't. And what would happen is that those girls would go into the big city and work at a bar or a restaurant, and you know what would happen. And so the sewing schools for girls helped solve part of that problem. And this came from the Isamani Sewing School for Girls. So I think that's fun.
The thing that has really touched me the most about Africa is the people are so giving. When we would go to Isamani, there would be, at that time, there were 10 preaching points, 10 chapels, basically. And we would go visit several of them, and Ed was there. We would sit in the front. The altar would be up here, there'd be chairs here, and we'd be facing a congregation. There'd be a railing in front, and on this railing were open bottles of Coca-Cola and donuts. A Coca-Cola would cost maybe at least a day's wage, maybe more than a day's wage. Okay, they're coming on. So these people don't have that much, but they share it all with you. So that's really touched me, and let's let Russ have it.
Thank you very much. We have on the screen now, Kirsten and Frank, can you hear me? We can't hear you. Okay, we can hear you now. That is Kirsten Leverson on our left. She's the fairly new executive director of Bearquah Bega. And on our right is Frank Mkocha, whom we have known for years in Iringa. He's a man for all seasons. Sometime I'll tell you the story of how he got me out of the mud on the side of a mountain in the rain one time. But he's basically primarily the scholarship clerk within the organization for DERA and St. Paul Area Synod. But we're going to have a couple of other, you just heard Kurt and Dot Kasich talk. A couple other people are going to speak briefly, and then we'll see if folks have been able to get down to Iringa, Miss Amani, to be with us or not. We'll have a conversation. But Ed Mallon has been at least twice to Iringa and Isamani. So you want to say a couple of words, Ed? Want to come up? Yes. Oh, well, I want to wait and see if we're waiting for some people from Isamani to hopefully successfully get down to Iringa. So why don't you and then Margareta say a few words. If they're still not here, we'll go ahead and talk with them.
You can just let me know. Yeah, thank you. Hi, I should say Karibu. Welcome. I have three things that I wanted to talk about. The first is the differences from the first time I went and the next time I went. Last time I went was in 2012. I was in the first group as well. And then I want to talk about the water project and then the formation of basically a credit union that we did with the people in Isamani. For the comparison, the African highway, which is what we took going out to Iringa, when the first time I went there, it was full of potholes. When I went back in 2012, it was smooth as could be. The first time I went, the food was a little not so great. I lost 14 pounds. When I went back the next time, my wife will testify, I probably put on a couple of pounds. The education was not regarded when we first went there as being all that special. By the time we came back, it was very special. People really began to recognize how important education is. And then I'd say on both trips, I had two roommates. On the first trip, it was the three amigos, which was Lynn Optebeck, Paul Lindstrom, and myself. And in my last trip, I had my granddaughter Kathleen and my grandson Will. And to this day, his wife says at least once a week he brings it up. It had such a powerful impact on him. We did a water project. In 2011, we began working with St. Paul Partners, Water for Tanzania. We chose to support the village of Isamani. in this project, and Chuck Rhodes, a Colorado research scientist who does watershed biochemistry, was responsible for addressing the condition of the water and what might be done. In Iringa, I had the pleasure of meeting with Matthew Amani, the program manager. He showed me water samples from other villages in the Iringa area where, adding the testing chemicals, the water was somewhat cloudy. He then showed me the water sample from Isamani. It was dark black. Without going into all the details, the problem was not just with Isamani, since many villages were using water from a lake where the water was contaminated. Bega Quag Bega had begun a regular radio program on Radio Fura, and on Friday afternoons, they would discuss water issues and how to handle and treat water. Basically, for consumption, boil it. These broadcasts resulted in the women in many villages demanding clean water. Through the effort of the village women and funds in coordination with St. Paul partners, the result is now a system of cisterns in each village to capture and make available clean water. Iringa Hope in 2009, we found out about Iringa Hope, a nonprofit that was developing microfinance in the rural Iringa. According to Tanzanian government survey, less than 1% of rural residents have access to financial services, yet 80% would benefit from them. We contacted the president, Dr. Thomas Hendrickson, in Lakefield, Minnesota. He explained that Iringa Hope Joint SACOS works as a bank with branch offices in participating villages. They provide the local branches with access to capital, auditing, and management, etc. They also do training for the leaders of the local SACOS. For a village to participate, the sponsor, in this case Holy Trinity, provides at least $3,000 seed money, pays for a safe that is then cemented into the ground in the village, and pays for the training of the leaders. The Holy Trinity congregation saw this as a worthwhile project, and before we left for Iringa in June of 2012, had raised over $5,000. While in Iringa, I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Hendrickson and discuss the project. The village itself must choose leaders, must have a certain number of members, and raise a certain amount of money, and then attend a week-long session of instruction. It appeared that this would take Isamani about a year to accomplish. Not so. The women of Isamani jumped on this project. They elected as president a woman who was intelligent, had a great deal of backbone, and was a true leader. The members elected as a treasurer a woman who had a background and understanding of money, and the vice president was a man in the village that they thought highly of. In August, Iringa Hope announced that they were having an educational session in September. Out of the blue, the three leaders from Isamani showed up with all the money required in cash, which was, they walked from Isamani to Iringa with all this cash. And they showed up at the diocese in Iringa prepared to spend a week at the session, even though they had not signed up for it. I received an email from Dr. Hendrickson and responded. Everyone was caught off guard, but provisions were made to take care of the money and let them attend. The average member of the Isamani SACOS had been living on about $200 a year. By the end of the first year, the members who had borrowed money, the typical loan is about $150 for 6 months, were living on between $300 and $400 a month. The success continues with more members, more loans, and increasing incomes. The extra funds have been used to improve family nutrition, school for the children, and improved housing. This is real impact that Holy Trinity has had on that community, and this is just two of many different things that have been done there.
Thanks very much, Ed. Margareta, can you come forward? Margareta was there in 2009, if my memory's right. Thank you.
So I have always loved to travel and experience different cultures. So when I learned that Holy Trinity arranged a trip to Tanzania, I wanted to join. And I was also interested of the African fabrics and textiles is my interest. And I wanted to learn more about their bright designs and whimsical designs and about batik. Another reason was that I learned that we had sent some money to Isimani for to purchase sewing machines. And so the young girls could get a different opportunity, and then domestic work. And Dot just talked about that also. And then I have a little bit background in product development, so I thought maybe I could make a difference. We also made some samples here of placemats and some runners and other things that we brought to show when we came to Isimani. When we finally arrived in Isimani, we did never find the sewing school or the sewing machines. So somehow they had disappeared. If they were in somebody's home or if they were broken, we don't know. But a couple of years later, we got some samples, and they were sent here to the church, and we were selling them at one of our services. So that was encouraging. And then I haven't been involved for a few years, and then I asked Russ where the status was now, and I was so happy to tell you that there is a training school or vocational school in Isimani, and they have sewing classes, driving, and music courses. And in the report that I received, it also says that they want more funds for this training center for additional courses in carpentry, cooking, electricity, and livestock. And I think that is something I would really love to support. And then I thought I'd tell you a little bit story about the dress I'm wearing, because when I came to Iringa, and I was on advice of Dot, she said, hire a guide and go around to the stores to look at all the fabrics. So I did, and we went out for a couple of hours, and then I found this fabric that this dress is made with. Here. There. So I loved the fabric. And then after a couple of hours, we came back and found a tailor. And I pointed at the design that I wanted to have made. And they took a couple of measurements. And I was wondering, how is this going to work out? But we walked away, and I pointed to the design I wanted. And we came back maybe 3-4 hours later, and everything was done, and the dress fit pretty good. And the only thing left to do was to do the ironing. So out came the iron with hot coals, and they put the dress on the sidewalk, and it was nothing underneath the fabric. It was where people had walked back and forth, and the ironing was done right there on the sidewalk. And so this is the result of that dress. The fabric we bought. But the trip was so much more. I wanted to tell you that it was so interesting in many ways. The welcome we received, I will never forget, when people came running down towards the bus and then was running along the bus for I don't know how long, but and they had palm leaves. They welcomed us. And then the doors were open to the bus, and there were all these smiling faces. And I can remember Kirsten Dot's granddaughter. She was probably 6-7 years old. She was very blonde, had blonde hair. And I can remember how they all wanted to touch her. I don't think they ever seen a young child with so fair skin and so blonde hair. But the service was so amazing also. I loved the singing. It was maybe over 2 hours that the service went on, but I enjoyed every minute of it, and to see the offerings and the dancing. And we also had to participate, and I think I did learn one sentence or hello or something in Swahili. That was all I did. But Carol, she was so brave. She stood up and sang a solo, and that was very interesting service. And then afterwards, it was dancing, and it was the Maasai people that were jumping, and we danced along. But it was so much more. We went on a safari, a wonderful experience. You could hear the lions roar, when you slept in those tents that were very luxurious. And we went to a rehab center in Iringa for handicapped people, which was very impressive. And they had their patients working with everything from serving to cooking at that rehab center where they had a restaurant. And we went to Zanzibar to learn about spices and how they grow and where they grow, and a little bit relaxation there with spending some time on the beach and all together different areas. So it was so much that happened during this trip. And I had been to a couple of other countries that had the same kind of living quarters that they have here in Africa, in Isimani, but I have never seen the generosity that I received, they gave of what they didn't have. And also the joy of worshiping was something that really impressed me and has a gives me lasting memories. So overall, I would like to start a relationship again and hope to go again. Thank you.
Thank you, Margareta. Yep. Dot.
That little 6-year-old just graduated from American University with a degree in public health, right? Public health. And she's going on to graduate school for epistemology so that she can go back to Africa and practice disease studies. So that's the kind of experience, that's the kind of change that inhabits each one of us when we go to Africa. Oh, and I have to tell one little story about Russ. When we were teaching, we decided that we wanted to go, we were teaching in Iringa at the university, and we decided we wanted to go to Isimani for a Sunday. So we went out and we had breakfast with the pastor and his wife, and Russ said, "What are you going to preach about today?" And the pastor said, "I'm not preaching, you are."
That was memorable. And Dot did more of the preaching than I did, but it was very memorable. Listen, I understand, Kirsten, that you've been in touch with the pastor and they're not able to get down to Iringa. But we'd love to have you and Frank share with us what you do there, what's going on, and maybe people here will have some questions for you.
Well, I'm Kirsten Leverson, Director of Bega Kwa Bega for the St. Paul Area Synod, and our office here in Iringa facilitates communication between companions in the U.S. and in Iringa. We handle the transactions for the gifts that you give and the student scholarships that you provide. I have been really having a fun time with Pastor Masigwa going out to visit the unpartnered parishes. And since last September through the end of this month, we will have visited 20 of the 50 unpartnered parishes. Most of these are new parishes that were originally part of a companion parish, but then a preaching point or several preaching points grew self-sustaining enough to become independent parishes. And so we are doing a lot to reach out to them, communicate with them, and share the gifts of the Equity Fund with them, as well as visiting and praying for them. Frank, you want to talk about what you do?
Okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is Frank Mkocha. I'm the scholarship clerk of Bega Kwa Bega. And for the last 10 years, I've been working, coordinating the scholarship program, which is done through the sharing the gift that St. Paul Area Synod churches donate to their partners here, but also as Kirsten said, we have the Equity Fund, which is a fund special for unpartnered parishes. So I'm also doing that, facilitating the communication regarding scholarship issues between Bega Kwa Bega SPAS and the Iringa Diocese. So from my desk, I have a direct communication with the parishes, those which are partnered and those which are unpartnered, when dealing with matters related to scholarship. But we also, in late January and also in late July, we visit the students who are in the diocese schools, so to see how they are doing, and also to see who are there before we proceed with the payment. Shortly, that's what I do. Thank you.
You know, when they're referring to unpartnered parishes, and Kirsten can correct me if I misstate this, some decades ago, there were about 70 churches in the St. Paul area synod partnered with churches in the Iringa diocese in Tanzania. But over the last decade and a half, there are now 120, 130 parishes in the Iringa diocese.
129.
How many?
129. And 79 of them have partners, because some of the congregations on the US side have more than one relationship.
So 79 of the parishes in the Iringa diocese have partners, but there's 129 parishes. So when Kirsten has been talking about visiting unpartnered parishes and Frank about scholarships for students from unpartnered parishes, we're talking about those 50 or so parishes in the Iringa diocese that don't yet have a partner back here at home. What about,
The
Kirsten,
visits
can you
that we've
just,
been doing-
there are a lot
sorry.
of people, I'm sorry.
The visits that we've been doing to those parishes have really let us know how important that equity fund is. Unpartnered parishes get 1 million shillings, about $450 each year to spend on scholarships. And so some of them will send 1 or 2 students to secondary school. Some of them are using the funds for TEE, that's theological education by extension, basically evangelism training. And then we also met a student this last week where they had received a post-secondary scholarship. So they are able to utilize some of the resources that we have. And they tell us it's an important gift.
Any other questions before I ask my next question? I don't want to monopolize the mic. Margaret?
Any funds go to the training school or vocational school?
I'm sorry.
Any of the funds go to the training school or the
Oh,
vocational?
okay. Margareta was just asking whether any scholarship funds go toward the training or vocational school in Isimani.
If I understood the question correctly, yes, the secondary scholarship funds can be used for secondary school, for vocational training, for evangelist training. There are some scholarships at EHEMI Seminary where parish workers go for additional training. Thanks, Fred, that works. We're trying to turn on lights here because apparently the one in this room isn't working. And it's just getting to dusk here.
Yeah, that's a thing that I don't know. I think Dot knew before she and I went to teach, but I didn't. That because Tanzania is so close to the equator, the sun rises and sets at about the same time year round, which is about now, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in Tanzania. Can you just, Kirsten, first, we really are looking toward, hoping for a group to travel from here to Iringa to Isimani next year. And we've heard a little bit, but can you just describe what a typical group visit entails when
Sure.
a partner comes over to visit?
We've got a group here right now. They arrived Thursday night. And typically the first full day in town is an orientation day. They go over to the diocese around 9 o'clock in the morning, which is right after the diocese staff has time for chapel. And most of the head office people are around. And so then the group gets to hear from all of the diocese department heads. And they're just telling them what the diocese does, what the Women Family Nurture department does, what the evangelism department does, they get a pretty good overview of the kind of work the diocese is involved in. They also tour the campus, which includes the radio station, the St. Paul Partners office, Dignity for Daughters, the Million Trees, and they get to hear about some of our affiliate partners as well. A typical rest of the day might include a tour of the university or downtown and the market area. Groups typically go out to their companion parish and village for maybe a 3 or 4 day visit over the weekend so that they can worship with their companions, visit preaching points, the different chapels in neighboring villages, meet any students who might be home, have a partnership meeting so that they share ideas about what projects coming next. And they also typically visit one of the diocese schools, perhaps the hospital, and most groups take a 3-day safari out at Ruach National Park.
And so, yeah, it's from leaving the U.S. to coming back home to the U.S., usually about 2 weeks.
Yep, 14 to 16 days for most.
Yeah. And can you give us
Some
an
of them add
idea,
on something in
examples of some
Zanzibar.
of the projects that the U.S. companions help their companions with?
Sure. Typical projects have been building a chapel. Usually the village can start the foundation and walls, making bricks and all of that piece. But then when they get to the roofing, that's normally a contribution from the U.S. partner. Other projects involve buying bicycles or motorcycles to help the evangelists and pastors efficiently get from one place to the next. There's a lot of parishes that have preaching points as many as 20, 25 kilometers from the main station. So that transportation is really helpful. There are also congregations that are helping to build dispensaries or clinics in some really remote rural areas. There are water projects that they take on with St. Paul Partners.
Pastors' houses.
Pastors' houses, yep.
Also, there's sound systems for the church.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but also there are some churches which they share the cost of buying the music system for the parishes.
Yeah, electronic music has become a real big thing here. And so amplifiers, sound systems that you can just plug a flash drive into, and electronic keyboards, those are highly prized.
And I'm going to turn it over to Erlinda in a second here, but Frank, can you just give us an idea, like right now, how many sponsored students are there within the Bega Qua Bega program?
Currently, we have more than 967. That's the number I had in May, so might be around that one.
Those are the numbers sponsored by parish and companion congregations
Yeah.
and also the equity fund? And then how many post-secondary, Frank?
The post-secondary, we have, last year we had almost 50 students. Yeah,
So it's in the order of 1,000.
yeah.
I just have a question, backing up a little. If there is, congregational interest and support, can you kind of outline the planning of a trip, just generally speaking, in terms of months preparation?
Hmm. So preparation for travel. We used to always say take 9 to 12 months to plan your trip and to have some group meetings and learn some Swahili together, or just think about what kinds of things you're going to be doing. And post-pandemic, the planning has kind of shrunk. There are more groups that are planning 4 to 6 months in advance of their trip. And it works, but I think the longer time is helpful, both to get the group to know each other well, for people who haven't traveled to learn something about Bega Kwa Bega and your own companionship, so that it's not all brand new when you get here. Yeah.
And in terms of starting to make those arrangements, group arrangements through Bega Kwa Bega, like how much in advance of the intended travel should the group start?
Say that again, please.
In terms of making the actual travel arrangements through Bega Kwa Bega for the group to come and have this 2-week experience, how much in advance of the trip should those concrete plans start being made?
It's helpful for us to have that same, 9-month kind of timeline. Usually groups talk to us a little bit before they make airline arrangements, and then, we keep talking and exchanging information throughout. What we can offer is we have a travel coordinator who will work with your group leader to make the reservations for vehicle and lodging and safari and village visits here. And we can put you in touch with an excellent safari company if you want to add on things in, say, Zanzibar or Arusha or outside of the Iringa area. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm mindful of the time. Any other questions for Kirsten or Frank? Yep, hold on a minute.
Is there a better time of the year to come?
It varies depending on where your companions are, because there are some places in the mountainous regions that are inaccessible during the rainy season. I think Isimani is pretty accessible all year round. I would say July and August are pretty busy times here. And September, October is getting to be a more busy time. January is a lovely time to be here, but there's more rain. Depending on what factors you're looking at, airfare is another big variable. So August is usually the highest airfare time, and January, February, a little bit lower. September, October has become, I think, a popular time because it's not yet the rainy season, and the airfares are lower.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you, Frank and Kirsten, very much. Sorry we didn't have some folks make it down Missamani, but we know they're there and they prayed for us this morning. So, thanks again, and Joe and I will see both of you in a very
Looking
short
forward
time.
to it. Thank you.
Take care, thanks.
Anybody's interested, I brought some copies of my book that is about the semester that Russell and I spent at the University.
Yeah, it's a very, even though there's some passages that make me cringe, it's a very good book. Any other questions or comments from those who've traveled there or would love to travel there? Yeah.
What does the word diocese mean in comparison to like synod?
I think it means exactly the same thing unless somebody, I mean, we have Roman Catholic diocese here in this country, but it is the organization of the churches within the Iringa region. And it has a bishop. Their system of assigning, I won't say calling pastors, assigning pastors is significantly different than here, but otherwise it's similar structurally.
A diocese is the geographical area within which all those parishes are part of that diocese, whether you're Roman Catholic or Polish National Catholic or Greek Catholic or.
Are you, okay, I don't know that. You mean the Catholic diocese geographically has the same boundaries as a Lutheran diocese?
Well, I grew up Polish National Catholic and I belong to the Eastern Diocese, you know, out in Pennsylvania and stuff, so.
Anyway, well, it is the same as synods in the Lutheran Church here. Well, thank you for attending. I am mindful of the time, it's almost noon. And we'll do some follow-up in the early fall to see what the level of interest is, and if there's significant or sufficient interest, talk about timing, and hopefully start to make some arrangements. So thanks all. Oh, Joe? Yeah, we're going. We're doing a different itinerary this year. Normally, we fly from Boston to Amsterdam on Delta or KLM, then KLM to Dar es Salaam. Iringa is about 300 miles inland from Dar es Salaam. You get there by bus, car, or small plane. Well, you know better than I, honey. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's about 300 miles inland, there is a small plane that makes that trip in about 90 minutes, or even better, with plus private bus, it's about an 10-hour trip, goes through and
I think we were here to BC and then 13 hours from BC to Senegal to refuel and then to Johannesburg. Another 3 or 4 hours.
And what did our tickets this year cost, honey? Do you remember? I don't remember. Well, it's in the low 2000s. That to my memory. That sound right? Yeah. But there's a lot of variation depending on exactly what day of the week, what month of the year, and so forth. But yeah. So, yeah, Franklin.
Those who will be watching this as a recording, what would be the average cost of getting involved?
Average cost of the entire trip? Dot says 3, Kurt says 4 now, and I think that's probably right, 4,000.
very inexpensive place to be, and so, the travel costs.
No question. The cost of getting there and back is the majority of the cost. It's fairly low cost while you're there.
Just so those at home can.
Yep. And just to address your question, the seasons are reversed because in the southern hemisphere. So June, July, and August there is their winter, but what that means is that the high temperatures only 72 instead of, I don't know, 82 or 84. We love the weather there. It's just like,
In July, August is like yesterday's day here.
and it's not in the rainy season. Dot and I were there teaching during the first part of our semester. It was still the rainy season, January, February, March. I didn't think it was too bad. But it was the rainy season. It did rain occasionally. But it's warmer and a little more humid during that time. It dries out. As Joe said, it's like the last 2 days here. Those what we call summer months, but they're winter.
And we were on the continent in November.
All right, well, listen, we'll follow up in September. Anybody any questions? Dot or Kurt, Ed, Margaretta, Joe, me? Anybody I've missed? Don't hesitate. Thanks, Mary, for coming.